Hey guys, Nike here. I wanted to update the warrior build that we use for Dungeons and Fractals after the 10.17 patch, which kind of nerfed empowered allies, which was a big reason for why the old trait loadout was the way it was. I'm going to go through the traits first, and then we'll touch on the gear, and I'll explain everything. For traits, we're doing 30, 25, 0, 0, 15 now. There's a couple reasons for this, as I'll discuss as we get to each change and where we deviate. Of course, we're going to have dual wielding, which will give us 5% damage when wielding a axe, mace, or sword in offhand. We will use offhand mace for the most part and during combat, and that's going to give us this 5% damage, which is quite strong. Slashing power, 10% when using greatsword. You can't go wrong there. And Berserker's power, the 15% damage boost when adrenaline is full. That is the bread and butter of pretty much every warrior build at this point. Just one thing I want to touch on is stick and move. You get a 3% damage bonus when endurance is not full, so it pays to double dodge when you know you're going to a fight where it's just a DPS race and you're not going to have to dodge. Like, say, the Evolved Destroyer in COE or the Mage Crusher in a Raw, or just any boss that you're just going to stand there and wail on them. Just start the fight out with a double dodge so that you get this 3% damage boost for the whole time. Moving on to arms. Precise strikes, 33% chance to cause bleeding on critical hits, which is kind of a snoozer, but it has some synergy with what we're doing. Rending strikes. This is the big change from losing empowered allies. When you lose empowered allies, you're looking at losing about a 5%, 5, 6, 7, something in there, depending on the amount, depending on your team, DPS boost for the whole party. That's a pretty big loss. Rending Strikes kind of makes up for it a little bit. Rending Strikes allows you to maintain 2 stacks of Vuln against bosses and 4 against trash mobs. Well, that's a 2 or 4% party-wide DPS boost, and it stacks with other warriors, so if you have multiple warriors in your party, which a lot of people do, it makes up for the loss of empowered allies pretty nicely, and it will help you keep your team closer to 25 stacks of Vuln. It's not a perfect replacement for empowered allies, and pretty much nothing would be because it was so good, but this will help close the gap just a little bit. Burst skills have increased critical chance. We don't use our burst skills, so that's negligible. Forceful Greatsword. This is the most controversial part of the build. For a while, I have argued against using this, and there's definitely a time and a place not to use it, and a time and a place to use it. The gaining might with a hit with a greatsword or spear, that can be detrimental, as I've explained. If you have a group where you have Ellies stacking might for you, and the Ellies are putting 25 stacks of might on you, and you use a forceful greatsword, and then you do your 100 blades, and then whirlwind, it's going to basically destroy half your might stacks rather than adding any might. So what you want to be sure of is to basically get a gauge for where you're at. If you're at like 20 stacks of might, Forceful Greatsword is going to help push you to the top. If you're already at 25, Forceful Greatsword is going to kind of hurt you and lower your overall DPS. So it's a give and take, and you have to really plan and think about your party composition and the level of organization you have and what it does for you. The other benefit is the skill cooldown being 20% faster. Now this is pure upside. This makes the cooldowns of Whirlwind Attack and 100 Blades perfect with the Fast Hands Axe Mace rotation. The one drawback that I found while playing the 30-0-0-10-30 build was that your Whirlwind Attack wasn't always off cooldown when you'd swap back, and you had some really awkward rotations every now and then that were definitely less than ideal, which means you were forced to auto-attack with the Greatsword every now and then. Having Forceful Greatsword back means we can go back to the old rotations where everything lined up perfectly, and the build just felt like it was smoother and much better rotations. Can't really go wrong there. And then we stop at 25 for Attack of Opportunity, increases bleeding damage to foes by 10%. The way percent damage modifiers work in the game is multiplicatively. Therefore, the more you have, the better each one gets. So you want to realize that when this says increases it by 10%, when you consider your dungeon potion, your sigils, your runes, your other percent damage modifiers, this is going to work out to actually be an increase of like 11 or 12%. So it's actually even better than what it says on here. So that's pretty great. Down in Discipline, we have Versatile Rage, 5 seconds of Adrenaline on every weapon swap. Not really a huge deal, but it helps a little bit. Signet Mastery, Signets recharge 20% faster. You can switch this out if you don't need it. If you're using Warbanner as your elite, I would pretty much switch this out for, where is it? Warrior Sprint, just to give you the run speed boost. But you can really do anything. You can do Shouts giving Adrenaline if you are running On My Mark. You can use Vigorous Focus if you have Frenzy. Like, there's really nothing great here, but Signet Mastery is the kind of the catch-all, and I kind of like it. And then Fast Hands, which I've gushed about in every Warrior video I've ever done, is pretty much the best thing ever as far as Warrior builds go. It allows you to weapon swap, take advantage of all sorts of fun tricks that you get with weapon swapping, and allows you to have great DPS rotations. So quickly, we'll go through the equipment. As always, it's going to be full Berserker with Scholar Runes. This is going to maximize our DPS. There is no way to get better DPS for a warrior in the game, besides running some crazy build with Desperate Power, but that's not practical for anyone, basically. As far as our weapons go, we're going to have Ascended weapons. Hopefully by now everyone has theirs, with Sigil of the Night on the main hand. And then our offhand mace will have Sigil of Battle, which is going to give us a total of 6 stacks of might permanently maintained, thanks to Fast Hands. And our trinkets are going to be full Berserker as well. Additional gear that I keep in my bag. I have kind of expanded my repertoire so that I have basically everything covered. I have an Axe of Bloodlust and a Warhorn of Bloodlust, so I can stack Bloodlust for the situations where Bloodlust is better, which I'll explain in a bit. I have an Undead Slaying Greatsword and Axe for when I do a Ra, which I do quite often, so it's definitely worth it to me to have this. A Shield of Energy. I break the shield out for difficult trash runs or for fighting Lupicus kind of with a less organized group where I know I need the extra dodges because the fight might last longer. I have my Warhorn with Sigil of Perception to stack Perception, and an Axe with Sigil of Perception to stack Perception. When you have two, I should have said this when I mentioned Bloodlust, but when you have a main hand and an offhand with the same stacking sigil, you get your stacks twice as fast, which is beneficial. So that way you're not stuck on your stacking weapon for too long. With this particular build, we'll be running Sigil of Perception. This will get us to, as you'll see, 99% chance to crit. And I have a Sword of Energy, which kind of takes the place of the shield for those situations. It's pretty good. In that one, you do more damage when you have it on, because one, you're getting your 5% extra damage from the from dual wielding, but you also have a higher attack range than the shield. The weapon strength itself is higher. So there's quite a bit of upside to using the offhand sword, plus it does a little bit of extra damage with the Torment. And then for when I have to go ranged, I use Longbow. You see I have Major Sigil of Fire. If I really cared, I would probably put Sigil of Night or Sigil of Force on it. But to be quite honest, I don't go ranged often enough in situations where min-maxing is important, so I don't bother with that. But definitely, if you care to go all the way, put Sigil of Force or Sigil of Night on there. So, with all the buffs, I'll show you. We'll drop our Banner of Discipline. With Banner of Discipline and Signet of Fury, and then Fury, we're at 99% chance to crit. This is about as good as it's going to get. And this will make sure that virtually every hit crits. There's been a lot of speculation, and I kind of agree with it, that the game caps chance to crit at 99% anyway. People have experimented with builds that have well over 100% chance to crit, and they find that every now and then they will still have a non-crit. So there must be something in the game engine that prevents you from going above 99% chance to crit. So this is good. It puts us exactly where we want to be in terms of damage. And as you'll see at the end of the video, I have a little demonstration that some of you may have seen before about some of the DPS that's possible with this build. Lastly, one thing, this build is kind of versatile too, in that if you want to go pure axe, you can do that as well. So how do we do that? We're going to go with axe mace, axe sword. You could also go axe mace, axe warhorn, but you do lose out on the dual wielding when you're on the warhorn swap. And we change the traits around just a little bit. Forceful greatsword we obviously don't need anymore, so that's going to become... Where is it? It's going to become Deep Strike, which is 40 plus precision for each unused signet you have equipped. And then Slashing Power becomes Axe Mastery. This is going to maximize our axe damage. As we don't need Forceful Greatsword, we can use this to gain additional chance to crit. So what does that mean? When we are pure axe and we have deep strikes, we will go with a more signet-oriented build. You'll equip Healing Signet in that way to get a total of plus 60 precision. Let me see, got to change this because there's a really annoying bug where you don't get the bonus till you change your signets back out. Well, in any event, this is going to give us some extra chance to crit, having that trait. So we won't need to stack Perception. When you run pure axe, you're going to want to stack Bloodlust. That's going to help push the DPS. If you don't care for the Greatsword Axe Mace playstyle, you don't want to use Greatsword, you just love pure axe, you're in luck because this is actually going to be the highest possible DPS build, is pure axe 30-25-0-0-15. It's a couple percent better than the Greatsword, simply because you can stack Bloodlust rather than accuracy, because you're getting the extra chance to crit from your signets. This is going to be the absolute highest DPS that you can get in a warrior build right now for dungeons and fractals. The key to this, though, is that you do lose out on the Greatsword utility, which I find to be quite good. I love Whirlwind Attack, I like Rush, and I'm willing to trade, personally, a couple points of damage to get access to that. But, again, some people do prefer the pure axe playstyle, and so that's what you'd want to do. Well, that's the update. One last thing I want to touch on is the food. I pretty much, since we are at 99% chance to crit with most builds, we don't really need plus precision food. So I would suggest running this 34 bowls I have of sweet and spicy butternut squash soup. It's very expensive and kind of a budget buster. Since you get 26 silver for doing a dungeon, and this costs like 35 silver, you don't want to go around wasting these, but when you care to have the best, this is the best. When you're on a budget, get 244 Dragon's Breath buns, which are going to give you plus 200 power for 30 seconds after killing an enemy, plus 10% crit damage. These are like 70 copper, and you are only losing every now and then 100 power. So these are a fine replacement. I use them now. It works good. When you're running the pure axe build, you still will want a little bit of extra precision. So you can use the regular butternut squash soup or the butternut curry squash soup for the 100 and the 10. But that is pretty much it as far as food goes. And just make sure you have all your normal dungeon potions and you're good to go. That is the build. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned after this. I'm going to show another clip of just a little bit of what the DPS that this build can put out in optimal conditions, which some of you have seen before, but if not, enjoy. Thanks.